the on-demand GUI tour. So to understand the on-demand for SharePoint migration landscape here, let's just take a quick tour of the interface. So accessing the SharePoint module after the project has been created, you'll see from the dashboard where if you had not already discovered content, you can actually discover your SharePoint site collections. In the creation of the project, going into the SharePoint module, typically, it will initially ask you to configure the project. However, there is an option to skip that. If needed, you can continue to go over here and select the Configure Project area, in which it actually provides you with two components. One is going to be the section for using the target account. So in the migration of content from source to target, there may be users, metadata properties, where a user does not exist, or as it says here, has no match in the target. So you can specify a default target account. So if, for an example, there is a John Smith in the source, but John has left the company, and so his account doesn't exist in the target, you can leverage a specific ID or an account to apply that metadata and permission model. Additionally, providing your credentials to each one of the source and the target admin URL centers here. So you can still support that in the configure project area. Again, the links are here in the ribbon as well as here in the card. It lists out if you've already collected your sites or performed your discovery, you'll have a listing of the site collections listed here, a card for some of the various tasks that you've already performed here in the interface, as well as the logging. So if you needed to quickly jump into some of the logs, such as if you created a migration opportunity and it's still running after, let's say, 20, 30 minutes, you go to lunch, come back, and now you can access those areas here. So in that, let's just kind of hop directly in. And some of these areas you can get to here at the top ribbon as well. So again, this is the dashboard. You can go to SharePoint Contents. I already have data discovered. However, we know that content changes. So if there are new sites that exist in the source environment that might not be here from your current state of discovery, you can go ahead and perform that action here and discover content. And you can see here from the wizard, there are two different options which can be displayed in a different module. Of the content that has been discovered, if you need to actually showcase the granular level of the content, you can select a particular object here. So let's say for benefits and the Contoso site collections, if we wanted to actually see the granular content, such as the individual lists, libraries, and or subsites within the scope of either one of those site collections, we can run the discovery of the SharePoint contents to be able to actually access that data. After the discovery is completed, and again, it's just as simple as selecting the option here and executing that particular task. Again, executing it now, later, or on schedule. Once that has been completed, then the data would actually display in the Show Contents area over here on the right. So let me scroll down to one of the sites that has been discovered. You'll notice that we have for Michael Plan here, Show Content. So I can access this interface, which now gives me two other levels of data. One is going to be the actual site or the web layer of that particular site collection, and another node is going to be the actual membership. So if needed, if you just need to migrate just the membership for that particular site collection, you have granular components here. If we wanted to go further inside of the, let's say, the My Plan website here, we can go further into the Show Content area. Here, we will list any of the lists in the libraries within the scope of that site collection or site, because if there were subsites here, we would also have a listing of web, and we can go further here. The ability to drill down to the SharePoint layer now gives you the ability to support granular migration of content. For an example, if, and I don't have a lot of content here, I'm actually give us a little real estate here, but you'll notice the source and the target columns over here. So if you ended up having a large list that had hundreds of thousands of items or documents into it, and for whatever reason, there might have been an issue in migrating some of the content, you don't have to re-migrate the entire site collection. You can selectively grab that individual list or lists and actually now migrate those individual components going through the natural migration wizard here. And of course, we can always navigate back through the hierarchy here and go back up to the parent level. Now, all of that, again, is just a part of the interface. and going back from the dashboard to the SharePoint contents. And basically, we're filtering the data. So if I get rid of this particular filter, which was looking at the actual parent for that particular site, we default everything to the actual site collection. So if you wanted to only look at the memberships for any of the sites in which you've performed a discovery for, again, you can quickly filter and see the membership structure, because maybe you're only wanting to remigrate the permission model or the membership of any of those sites. Kind of go back here to the beginning. And so again, this is the default view once you go into SharePoint contents. After you've identified the contents, you can match on the content, because again, we're going from tenant to tenant. So the ability of selecting multiple objects allows you to perform what we call a match operation. That ensures that your target will be exactly the same. So sites/alpha, sites/askhr. Now, there may be instances where in the target environment, you want to perform a migration using a totally different URL. So the match will basically identify if that particular URL structure pre-exists in the target. So of course, in that context, you're just going to migrate content on top of the existing site. We do have an operation in the migration to allow you to select whether or not you want to clear the existing content. So again, we have those options, but the match gives you the first step in identifying if you have existing content using the same URL structure. If you're wanting to, as I kind of alluded to earlier, changing that structure, then we do have a map from file. So again, just from a tour of the environment, we're giving you the ability to discover your sites from the very beginning, go to the granular levels of the content, match to see if the actual site URL exists in the target, migrate content, and then of course a few additional items such as mapping, meaning identifying a specific URL. Deletion is deleting of the existing structure. Maybe you're wanting to start with a clean project of data. You can basically select that you don't, for an example, want to identify and work with these particular objects, meaning these site collections, so you can perform a deletion. This is simply deleting the view of those sites within the On-Demand for SharePoint module, not deleting content out of SharePoint. So again, it's just a simple deletion operation. And now we're just working with 5 fewer SharePoint sites at this time. Upon any of the actions that you take, such as if I decide that I want to actually perform a match operation, and if I run now, I click next and perform this particular operation, another part of the interface is understanding the events and the tasks. So we just performed a match, which is a task. A discover of SharePoint content is a task. Discovering of SharePoint site collections is a task. You can always jump into the tasks area to see any of your previous tasks. Additionally, if you needed to identify how did you configure that particular task, you can select on any one of these pre-existing tasks and edit the task. You'll identify how you configured the migration. You can technically restart the migration or whatever task, such as the discovery, from one of the previous tasks here. Now, for an example, I performed the matching task. What you'll notice in the interface is for every task, there will be one or more events. You can jump directly to the Events tab, but the Events tab will display all events for every task performed. If you're wanting to see just the events per task on the right-hand side, you can select Events here. And so you'll notice for this particular task, which was matching task, again, a filter, you'll see the timestamp, what was taking effect here, and then, of course, the completion. Now, this is a pretty simple task. If I jump back over here, and let's say if I look at migration, you'll notice 200 events for the one task. And so from here, it, again, pre-filters based off of the previous task. You have your time and date stamps, and it always displays the last task at the top. But just like anything else, if you wanted to, you can click on the header here and put it in sort order. And so now you'll see that the task was started. It started off because this was a site migration. It provisioned the target site. Of course, it started with the membership and so on. And within each one of these, in the event, if there are any additional details, such as in the batching process here, let me go down a little further. Let me put this in the opposite order. And there are instances where you will have a few additional details in the right-hand side jump into and gather. So this concludes looking at the tour of the SharePoint migration within the on-demand module.